welcome everybody to our Broadcast Revolution event. Have the absolute pleasure of hosting not one or two, but three wonderful ladies from Steph's Packed Lunch this afternoon. So hopefully going to be a really nice sort of in-depth chat that we're going to get into. Just a reminder, as with all of our events, if everyone could please tweet any questions to @BroadcastRevo, then for the last sort of 15-20 minutes, we'll be taking those questions from the audience. So please send us in your questions, anything that you'd like to put forward to our guests for the discussion. That would be fantastic. So first of all, welcome Emma, Fiona and Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I think what would be really great to sort of kick us off is to hear a little bit about each of your roles at Steph Packed Lunch, because I know from when we were speaking earlier, there was, various different teams behind the operation that is Steph's Packed Lunch. So it'd be really great to kind of hear about what you individually do, but also how the wider team at Steph's Packed Lunch works. So I don't know, Lisa, if we could start with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sarah. So Steph's Packed Lunch is live from Leeds every weekday, Monday to Friday from 12:30 till 2:10. As Sarah indicated, that myself, Emma and Fiona are representing the entertainment and news and human interest team today, but we do also have a team that also look after consumer features and cookery, as well as kind of another area that we kind of do, and sometimes financial things as well, which comes under consumer. So they're not joining us today, but if anyone needs their contact details, then I'm sure we're happy to share email addresses for you to reach out to them. But yeah, the show is a mixture of kind of consumer, lifestyle, kind of showbiz chats, with a real kind of human interest at its heart. So even kind of from our end, from the showbiz point of view, the guests have to have kind of really good, strong, compelling stories, interesting kind of personalities, rather than kind of just a name in their own right. The show started September 2020, and we can exclusively reveal to you all today that we have been recommissioned for another third series. So we will be coming back. We come off air at Christmas and we'll be back on air in January, running right through until June. So it's been performing really well. The channel are super pleased with it. So we're delighted to say we're going to be continuing on.
That's fantastic. Exciting news for the team. So Emma, would you like to give us just a little bit of an overview what you look after as sort of head of news at Steph's Packed Lunch?
Lisa's been a really good overview. Well, we also have a features team who kind of do more like little films and things that get dropped into the show along the week. So they're items that might take a bit longer to explain, or we do some celebrity features as well, which Lisa will probably tell you about. But so I'm head of news, and there's 4 of us on the team. We're all trained journalists with newspaper and magazine backgrounds. And we've all kind of done this kind of job before on other sort of magazine shows. And in general, we try to fill 2 slots a day with news / human interest features. They're typically 12:45 and 1:15, and they are quite wide ranging, so they can be based on a news story, or an awareness week, or just something completely random. It's quite hard to explain what we like, but when Fiona and I were talking earlier, and it's a bit of a cliched saying, but it's one that we both have kind of had from our early days in TV, we're mainly interested in ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So someone with a really amazing story to tell about their lives, or something that they've done, or something unusual, or something that you've never seen or heard of before, or about something that may never affect you, but you would just be interested to know how that affects someone else. So it's not hard news, although we have done some of those sorts of things. But it's just ordinary people doing extraordinary things and coming on to tell us their story, really. So we start the day, we do scour the papers and may or may not chase stories from there, but a lot of it is finding our own stories on the ground. So looking at TikTok, looking at international media, all those kinds of things. So, but at the heart of what we do is we just want a really great human interest story. That's our main thrust. I don't know if Fiona wants to add any more to that, because she's
no, that was brilliant.
That's exactly
what she said.
But yeah, what you said. So I'm just a news producer, so I work in a team.
Not just a news producer.
Yeah.
So the four of us,
generate stories like a churning out.
2 or more stories every single day on a good day. Looking for humans that are interesting. Clue is in the title.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think as you guys have all mentioned, obviously there are various parts to the Steph's Packed Lunch team, but I think obviously what would be great from this today is obviously just dig into your remit, Lisa, looking after celebrities, what kind of guests you're looking after, and tap into as well and dig a little deeper into what Fiona and Emma are there saying from a news point of view. But I think what would be really great if you had to describe who or break down Steph's Packed Lunch audience, or give us a sort of typical, who is the typical viewer for the programme, how would you describe them? I don't know who would be best to kind of point this towards.
Me and Fee were talking about this earlier.
It's really hard.
I think that is part of it. It's quite hard to pin down I don't know if Lisa might not agree, but a typical packed lunch viewer. I think
it's really difficult. We've got 80-year-old grandmas, we've got 35-year-old stay-at-home blokes. We do have a higher proportion of men than normal, than normal daytime TV programmes, say than This Morning with Swimming. So well-rounded.
Yeah, and also apparently we have quite a strong audience of young viewers as well. So it's really broad. I suppose when I worked at ITV and stuff, we would say that our viewer was very much a Daily Mail reader, which I don't necessarily think our viewers are, but our stories are quite often may have come from those sources, but probably with a slightly more, do you say, Fee, more kind of our audience a bit more, maybe liberal, a bit more left-wing, liberal.
Like a more liberal approach. Probably slightly... I would say Daily Mirror, but less tabloidy, more kind of deeper thinking.
Yeah, but not quite the Guardian. So that's not really it's hard to explain. But I think we've got a very broad viewership. It's I don't think it's honed. I don't know if you agree, Lisa, whether.
Yeah, and I think one of the I totally agree. I think that we have it's really quite hard to pin down, and I think throughout the show you will see that we try to do things that target lots of different people. So we never try to just be one thing. I think like anything, you're trying to kind of appeal to as many people as you kind of can. So I think one of the things that we try to really push is our USP of kind of being outside of London. I mean, apart from us and kind of BBC Breakfast at the moment, we are the 2 shows that are out there. So I think we try to give a voice that's not a London steer voice where it's possible, whether the other shows like it or not, their teams are in London, their editorials in London, that does necessarily start to affect. So we don't, our team is in Leeds. There's a few of us who kind of work remotely, but it's very much, and Steph's very passionate about that, of making sure that we're kind of covering stories that kind of are not just London within the M25, that are kind of Scotland, Wales, Ireland. And equally, you'll see that through the presenter friends and people that we use on screen. We aren't just kind of a Southern voice in that regard. We try really hard to kind of get a real mixture of kind of accents and things on screen. So yeah, from our point of view, I'd say that was another thing worth considering.
Yeah, and we're definitely not, in difference to lots of the other shows that I've worked on, we're definitely not specifically female orientated mums at home. That's not, it's some of our remit, but not all of it.
Because I know obviously you mentioned that obviously being Leeds based and what you were talking about as well, Emma and Fee, in terms of how the audience is probably slightly different in terms of other programmes on at the same time. But how else does the programme try to differentiate from other daytime programs such as your ITV daytimes, like your This Morning, Loose Women, like BBC Morning Live? How do you try to strike that sort of point of difference, either through your guests or how you tell your stories? Is that something that you're kind of consciously doing? I don't know if I can come to you first, Emma.
I think we try and be more diverse than other programs. We try and look at topics that other programs might not look at, like what were we saying earlier about the when we did the story on vulvas, so it was about
sorry, Emma.
No, go on.
We did a story on vulvas. What else can I say?
How else can I say that?
Women not knowing that part of their body intimately, and being able to discuss issues around it, and also having cosmetic surgery because they didn't think theirs looked right, and all of this. And the way that we did it was an artist had done loads of plaster casts of different shaped vulvas. It sounds really mad now I'm telling you, but it really worked on screen because it wasn't salacious, it wasn't too sexualized. It was just very, very clear. We talked about health issues around that, but I don't really think certainly any other ITV or BBC daytime program would have tackled that, and I don't know many other presenters apart from Steph that could have handled it with such a plum. So we're able to do that because of the way she is and how open and accessible she is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that she's very key. Steph's very open to kind of pushing the boundaries. I think, this is her name attached to the show. And, whereas the other daytime shows have been around for, donkey's years and stuff and really established, she's still kind of finding her rhythm for the show. And that's exciting because it means that we can try a lot of new stuff. I mean, I don't think you would have seen another show where the presenters all took their makeup off and were brave enough to kind of sit there and go, look, this is us on airbrush. This is really important that people
have a smear on live TV.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's incredibly brave, and I think particularly during the pandemic, if people haven't seen the show, she's really played to her business strengths and her passion for, we've been doing CV clinics, we've been doing small business markets, she's been doing everything she can to try and help people out of kind of situations that they're currently in, and what can we do is so I think that's something that is really important, and again echoes what we're saying about putting people at the heart of kind of what we do. We had a really powerful letter, didn't we, from that woman who said that the show had really made a difference to her and really kind of helped her financially. She was really struggling through the pandemic, so we've had some really, really powerful responses to that. So yeah, I think we're unafraid. I think we are, we're new and we're willing to push those boundaries, and that's really exciting.
It definitely is, and I think it's interesting that you've all mentioned there the importance of and obviously the huge role that Steph plays, and I suppose it'd be quite interesting to know how much of a role Steph has in the sort of what's being covered in the show, topics and issues that she's particularly passionate about and keen for the show to sort of champion. Does that kind of drip feed through to the work that you guys do as well, I imagine?
I think not massively, but I think we're all quite aware, I don't know if everyone agrees with me, her background is in engineering, so she's quite interested in STEM careers for girls, pushing that for girls to typically drop out of the whole maths engineering type thing. So I think that's one of her passions, so that definitely comes through. I think she is passionate about talking about difficult subjects, but I think it's taken her a while to work out how she does that best, because some of the interviews that we sort of gave to her at the beginning, I think because she hadn't really done those kind of interviews before, she probably found quite difficult, but I think she is in the groove of them now. But in terms of her passions, I think she obviously, her background is business and economics and things like that, so things like STEM careers for girls that I probably wouldn't have got through on other shows probably do, as long as it's the right case study and it's the we can bring the subject alive enough for it to work on air. Then I think those I think she has an influence in that way, but I wouldn't say so much in terms of human interest news, kind of other stuff. Would you, Fee? I wouldn't.
No, if there's a particular no, I don't sort of bear that in mind when I'm booking stuff and when I'm creating stories. I don't. And occasionally, it's just useful sometimes. She loves entrepreneurs. She likes the underdog. She likes people battling for. She likes campaigny stuff. So I will use her
whistleblowers. You know, yes. So that's sort of her journalistic background as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that with showbiz. I don't think we don't ever run stuff necessarily past her or gets kind of run past her editor. But having said that, obviously, if there's something she's particularly passionate about. So again, to echo what the girl said, we know she's passionate about business. We know she likes the likes of a Dragon's Den. So we've had Sarah Davies on a couple of times, or Deborah Meadens, or that type of thing. So, you know, she likes that. Equally, I think there was a time where she'd watched the Rocks film on Netflix and she was really passionate about it. So kind of came to us. So it's but I think, you know, if we feel confident enough about the story and believe it's a right fit for the show, then she'll trust us if we kind of lead on that.
I suppose I know you mentioned briefly there, Emma, about the importance of case studies. I know when we were obviously speaking earlier and we had our sort of brief chat before this, you were talking about how case studies are really, really key from you guys when you're putting together your news segments. So I wondered if you'd be able to give a little bit more of an overview of what a story needs for you beyond obviously the case study, but you know, it's not just having a case study, having the right kind of a case study. So what are you kind of looking for when you're pitched a news story, or when you're looking at the stories for the day and what your team are going to cover?
Sorry, I'm just going to tell, my door's gone. I'm just going to shout up. Fee, can you?
Yeah, well, the case study isn't just important, it's key, it's central. So we build the story around it. So without the case study, or what we're calling a case study, we don't have a story. So the information is built, or the rest of the information is just supporting that. So I'm just looking at my whiteboard. So for example, I've got a story about a surrendered wife, a woman who believes that you should just be a housewife at home, and that you shouldn't go out to work and you should just look after your man. I've got a honey trap private detective who will give us the secrets on. Do you see what I mean? It's what I'm looking for is central. The person is central.
Yeah, it's the key really to something getting on the show or not.
So for example, if you're looking, the private detective has come forward because she has a brand to promote. She has her company, and so that is how she is getting her company out there. She is giving us a brilliant story through her personal experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I suppose it follows on from how important is new research for you, or having data. If we're offering as you were saying, Fiona, it's a story primarily, it's an individual story, but having some context to that story, which is either pinned in sort of consumer research or other kind of data. How important is that for you guys?
If you give me some data or some research, great, but I will come straight back to you and go, where's my person?
Yeah, but yeah, so the new data and research is kind of, it is important, but it has to be alongside the case study, because I suppose similarly, if we just offered our editor a case study, he quite often says, but why are we doing it now? So I guess if you can say, because X has found that 20% of women blah de blah, that always helps, but the most important thing is the case study.
And can I just add to that? I find it, I do, a little bugbear of mine is when I get sent stats and I go, thank you. So, where is this human interest behind this story? And then I'm asked, oh, well, could you find that? Well, no, not really. It's down to you to provide that for us.
The person that the individual story is your hook, rather than the statistics being your hook and then going out to find it. And I suppose a follow-up question to that, if we're talking about sort of case study stories, and I know you mentioned about diversity at the beginning, you know, when we've done these sorts of events before with people from the Sky, BBC, ITV, one of the things that's always come up is the importance of not only having a diverse sort of range of case studies, voices and experts, but actually even ingrained in sort of the stories that are being told, representing a far more broader area of society than we would have done before. Is that very much a priority for you guys as well?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, you know, and it sort of gives us pause for thought. We couldn't end up doing it in the end because we'd done too much on it before, but there was a lady that was going to come on, and we might have her back another time, about breast cancer in Black women, because it can not just present differently, but also sort of you know, she was sort of saying the Black community have different ways of dealing with it. So it was a story that I really wanted to have on, because it wasn't something that I'd even, you know, thought about, and I thought it was also a really important story to have. So yeah, it's not just I suppose that in a way is sort of putting it back to, I can't explain what I'm trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is yes, to think about diversity of stories as well as the people in the stories being diverse. You know what I mean? So yeah, no, that is definitely really important to us.
And I assume that crosses over in the same way for when you're looking to book your guests, Lisa, in terms of, you know, having a diverse range of guests, but also how much of it, obviously I assume it's always working out who's a fresh face, who's a new face, and then not using somebody who's constantly doing the rounds on TV. But how do you kind of square that circle in terms of getting somebody who's a good and well-known voice whilst making room for those new diverse guests that we probably wouldn't have seen previously?
I would think, well, our team are a little bit different in so much that, you know, we kind of as well as kind of casting the kind of sit down interviews, we also look after the presenter friends and the kind of comedians that kind of sit alongside Steph. So that's quite often an opportunity for us to try somebody new and try something. So you'll see that we've used the likes of like kind of Nina Wadia recently came on as a guest. We really liked her. We thought she was great. We're like, actually, why don't you come back on as a presenter friend? So we've got some flexibility with stuff like that. If we feel that someone comes on and they enjoy the show and they get the gist of it, if Johnny Vegas comes on and we really enjoy him, we can ask him to come back and maybe do cookery for us. And I mean, I feel the general feedback we get from a lot of guests is actually once they've been on the show, they generally love it so much and they just completely get it that then we have no problem getting them back again. I think it's, you know, the challenge has been launching a show in COVID. A lot of people were down the line, obviously, to begin with. But anybody we've had come up has had a great time. You know, Gail Porter was an example of someone that came on for a charity campaign and we really liked her. And then we thought, actually, she was really eloquent. She told a great story. Let's maybe get her back on as kind of. So I feel like that's what I find exciting about working on the shows, that we have Steph, but we also have kind of lots of people coming through and the potential to create a new role for them is always there. In terms of sit-down guests, I mean, I think that, you know, we always will want to go for the household name, but we will try new talent that kind of come through. For us, I would always say with us, it's more about the personality of the person involved than it is about the name, because you can get some people, we've all worked with talent before, who are a fantastic name, but just quite worthy, you know, kind of, you know, maybe all right playing a part, but not necessarily being themselves. And I think because Steph's showbiz or entertainment guests are not her natural kind of area, you know, that she'd admit that herself, and she's really worked hard over the last year to kind of educate herself in that area and kind of become better at kind of interviewing celebrities and stuff. So I think for us, the more she has someone opposite her who's really confident and a real personality, the more that the interview will come across really well. So for us, we're looking, you know, we had Boys Life on the other day. So we had, you know, the guys from that, and they were brilliant and they were great. And they interacted with the likes of Denise and the others on the sofa as well. So the stronger personality and someone who can carry their own, the more likely they are to kind of to make the cut.
So I know as well, when we were chatting earlier, Lisa, it's also, you were talking about the importance of having also what they can talk about beyond what might be what you know, the various campaigns that they're working with and they're pushing. It's also having somebody who's relevant and can talk more broadly about what they have coming up.
Yeah, we always talk about having a guest who can give like a really well-rounded chat. So it's kind of, obviously a lot of the guests we have, say 99% of the guests we have are promotional. They've got something to kind of plug or kind of attach behind it. But what we just have to be careful is viewers are a lot more savvy about these things these days, and they don't really want to feel like they're kind of being pushed or advertised kind of too. So what we try and do is just be a little bit more clever with it and just think, if we're going to have the likes of a Jack Whitehall on to talk about an eBay campaign that he's kind of fronting with his dad, let's have a look at what else has Jack got to talk about. Well, actually he's got the Brit Awards to talk about, and he's got the new series of League of Their Own on Sky. So actually then when I'm selling it into our editor, if I was selling it on the basis of the eBay campaign, he would think, that's 5 to 7 minutes. We're going to run out of stuff to talk about within that. But if I can pitch it on the basis of he's got all this other stuff and we're quick and talk to you about that, then what happens is you get an overall interview where the brand gets mentioned, he gets to talk about it, but we talk about other things too. And it kind of works for everyone because we get a more entertaining angle, and it doesn't get us into problems with Ofcom or our lawyers, because therefore everything's been presented and it's just a small mention rather than 5 to 7 minutes solely talking about one particular thing.
Will you take talent if they have a strong affiliation with another broadcaster, such as like somebody who's well known for being on ITV, on any of the ITV daytime programs, or is a BBC talent? Does that affect it at all, or again does it just come back to those points about personality?
More of a problem. Yeah, I think they would probably more have a problem with us than we would the other way around. I don't think, I think ITV are quite strict with their talent and kind of like their talent to do their shows. But I don't sense that. I mean, we don't prioritize Channel 4 talent over other names. I think everyone is just decided on the basis of who they are and what they've got to kind of talk about. So I think the more I would say to anybody out there that if you are pitching something and it's tied to a particularly commercial brand, or it's always good to know what else they're up to and to pitch to us, because that helps us sell it in. Or the other thing I would say, which I think I've picked up with you a few times before, Sarah, is like, do they have a lived experience of something? So if someone's fronting a campaign about dog adoptions kind of not being right, or not kind of done above board, if they're just someone who's passionate about dogs, they're less likely to get through than someone who's actually had experience of that. So again, echoing what Emma and Fiona said about the strength of that kind of case study, if it's a story about fraud and you've then got talent who've been a victim of fraud themselves, some of the great stories we've had are the likes of, Paul Merson recently talking about his gambling addiction, and that's his own lived experience, rather than him being the face of because his mum had, or, it kind of just takes it one step further removed. So that kind of always works a bit better for us.
I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's tweeted in their questions. Please keep tweeting them in at Broadcast Revo, and in the next sort of 10-15 minutes we'll be coming to the audience with their questions. I also just wanted to briefly talk about sort of viewership for Steph Packed Lunch. I know we talked about sort of the breakdown in terms of who the audience is, but obviously sort of last year we saw broadcasters reporting a huge spike as more people were spending more time at home in front of their TVs, and they'd seen a spike in that viewership. Appreciate obviously the show launched just over a year ago, but have you found that challenge viewers starting to go down, or how have you kind of met that challenge of holding that audience that have sort of come amongst sort of various lockdowns? I don't know who's best placed to answer.
Probably all of us, but I would say, I mean, when we all started last August, September, and then the lockdowns kept happening, I was like, oh God, this is going to be terrible. I'll be gone by Christmas. But actually, I can tell you, because I've just checked with my editor, we've quadrupled our audience since the beginning of series 1. So while I can't give you specific figures, no, I
was going to ask you.
It's I cannot give you those. It's definitely going and growing, and it has quadrupled. And bearing in mind that we've been through, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 lockdowns, God knows, I can't remember now. I think I'm pretty amazed by that, actually.
And we were lucky enough to have
yeah.
Sorry.
Go on, no, you go.
So I was just going to say, we were lucky enough to have a kind of purpose-built set that took into account social distancing when a lot of broadcasters didn't. So we could have guests in at a time when they didn't. So I think we massively benefited from that.
What was amazing is that we have all the way through managed to keep having studio guests, which are always better than down the line via video link. So it's quite amazing that we have managed to keep doing that throughout.
I was going to ask,
and I think that's really helped with the show growing our audience, because people like to see people in the flesh, as it were, you know. So yeah.
I was going to ask, actually, being I know we spoke earlier about, you know, being Leeds based and not being in that sort of London bubble, but do you find at all that it does impact guests that get on the programme if they are, let's say, London based and they want to do a down the line, for example? How much of it, maybe this is a question for you, Lisa, how much of it is kind of a bit of a deal breaker for not having somebody in the studio?
I mean, I think, like Emma said, certainly during lockdown, obviously we understood that people were down the line reluctant to travel. But as Emma said, we still got people who were prepared to do it. I mean, we'd put on cars if it meant making them safe, that, you know, they didn't want to travel on public transport. So, you know, I think people were keen to kind of get out and about. I think now that, or certainly seemed that we're getting better. Studio will always be our preference. So if someone comes to us and says you can get them in studio, you are more likely to get a guest across the line, or a showbiz guest across the line, if I can get them in studio. If they're down the line, it's almost like you're kind of, you know, you're outside a party that you're not going into. Do you know what I mean? They're all having a great time. We've got a live audience in there. We've got cookery going on. We've got presenter friends. And if you're down the line, you're just losing that connection. So again, coming down to personality, if it's someone who's very strong, very funny, a Tom Allen or somebody like that, that's fine, because we know that they'll still deliver down the line, and we can get that from them. But if it's someone who's maybe a bit of a shyer character, or someone that we're just not so sure about, we just won't take that risk. We'll just feel like it'll just get lost. So, we can provide travel, and we can kind of put people up overnight. I mean, what we've been increasingly doing is looking at things like comedy tours. If people are on tour and they happen to be in the Leeds area, all that's opening up again. Theatre shows, music gigs. If people are in the area, then we'll say, look, and it doesn't necessarily have to be when the book's out, or when, we're happy to take a few weeks later if it means that they happen to be, we had Ranulph Fiennes on recently, and his book had been out earlier in the summer. Ed Balls was another example, but they happened to be in the Leeds area. They knew they were doing books and publicity tours up there. So we were like, well, great. We'd rather hold out and have someone in the studio than throw it away and have them kind of down the line. So that will always kind of be our priority. So we'll push for that. I don't think it's held us back. As I say, I'm confident that once someone has come into studio, or we've worked with an agent, and they've had on, then when we're going back to people and saying, will they come, it's not a problem. Rosie Jones is coming back again in a couple of weeks. I think this will be her third appearance on our show. She loves it so much. She wants to come back, So I think, once people have done the journey and they know it, I would just encourage, all the PRs out there to not just assume that because someone's London based, they don't want to go up to Leeds, because we do have a lot of that where, there's almost a reluctance to ask. But what I would say is that, quite often they're not asked the question, because, we've had it with a lot of people where we say, well, look, can you just ask, because we won't take them down the line. And actually they've then gone back and said, yeah, they will do it. And they've had a great time. So it's only a couple of hours away, and to be honest, you're going to start noticing that a lot of TV shows are going to start moving out of London. So traveling outside of London is going to have to be part of the PR remit when you do have access to talent moving forward.
I don't know if we're supposed to be answering these questions that are popping up, but right now, but someone's just asked if we offer travel and accommodation to case studies as well as talent, and we do. So yeah, that's quite important. I mean, obviously our case studies can come from anywhere in the country, but yeah, all travel and accommodation is covered. That we certainly don't expect people to pay for themselves.
No, that's good to know. I just want to come back to now you, Fiona, and Emma, just on stories, because I appreciate, obviously, as you were saying, you're driven by the daily news agenda, but are there any topics that you're always interested in covering that your viewers care about, be it fraud or anything along those lines? That are there any topics that you will tend to cover more of, whether that's consumer finance issues or anything along those lines?
I don't think for news there's anything preferential, because we anything goes for us really. But obviously, like you said in the beginning, we do have a consumer producer or consumer department, and I can't really speak for Emma, who runs that department, so she might have a preference for some of those kind of more consumery topics, you know. But in terms of news, no. Would you say, Fee? I wouldn't say there's.
No, I mean, the problem is if we start saying that we want something with parents or something, with this, we get flooded, and then all we've got is parent stories. So I'm going to say no, anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
But in terms of like,
really.
Yeah, and maybe this is one that falls within the consumer team, but any sort of, how far in advance do you plan for bigger moments? Like, I know we spoke briefly, obviously COP26 is a, huge event that all media are turning their attention towards now. Anything like that you will forward plan a bit more, or is that something would sit within your consumer team?
I think we're supposed to probably do a bit more of that, but just the turnaround is so
quite handsome,
so we don't massively plan in advance. No. And also, unlike my last job, where I don't know, like we did, part of my job was to help with the covering of the US election, things like that. We did do a bit of it last year, but we don't really cover those big news events in the same way that other shows do. So there wouldn't be as much forward planning really for those kinds of things.
So is it very much a next day? You're looking at the next day when you're
next week, next day.
Next week.
Yeah. So for example, Halloween.
The furthest we're looking probably the next month. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at Halloween. Well, I have been looking at Halloween sort of for the last week.
Yeah.
So it's not far in advance.
We can be on the ENTS team, we can be a little bit more further forward. So I think because, things get announced when it goes into production kind of months before something's filming. So we do have bids in for like next May, next June and stuff like that. I suppose the trouble is that far out, a lot of people don't know whether they have got access to people or not. So our job is we put bids in as soon as we hear about something, we would. And then we'll constantly keep in touch with PRs about when something will be scheduled, when it's due to transmit or be released, and then keep in touch kind of in the lead up to that. So, we will be booking last minute, but we can secure stuff quite far in advance as well.
So how, if somebody's got a good guess, Lisa, how much notice, how far in advance do you tend to book? When's the best time for them really to get in touch?
Yeah, I think
weeks
like,
before,
for example, we've probably got like, we're nearly full next week, for example, but the week after we're not. So, we're not so far in advance, but we're also like, if someone was going to come to us with an amazing guest, we would find a way to kind of make it work. So as I say, the thing with the show is because it's lots of different elements, as it's like a magazine, different elements filling up. What might happen is, we might have a slot for something, but then, by this afternoon, it might have changed. So it just kind of depends. So what we tend to do, if it helps people, is if you give us a bit of a steer, we can always pencil something and then we'll try and let you know before something else gets booked in. Or if we say to you, look, we need an answer by today because otherwise we're going to lose something else. What we don't want to do is be holding out for something and it not come to fruition, and then kind of, we've got to fill a show, we've got a live show to kind of put out. So we can be flexible though. I think we're fairly flexible.
I suppose the only thing we have sort of slightly pre-planned for a little bit is book releases. So we get the book catalogues from the publishing houses and we'll look through those and see if there's any sort of non-fiction kind of things that we'd be interested in. And we've booked quite far in advance, haven't we, Fee? Like like Jackie Weaver's new book, those kinds of things. But then sometimes that also falls into the showbiz remit, doesn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, we cross stuff over a little bit.
Any celeb sort of books, yeah. Whereas I think there's a book coming out in November written by a normal person whose mother had Munchausen's by proxy. So we've already put a bid in for that probably a month or so ago. That comes out in November, but that's probably as as far as it goes. So yeah.
And it's worth saying sometimes if there are book people on there, that sometimes we do stuff for the paperback if we haven't been able to do it for the hardback. So obviously we know there's a lot of, trying to place somewhere and keep everyone happy. So we might not necessarily be able to do it for the hardback if they've secured other TV interviews, which, we struggle to follow. So sometimes we will say, well, look, could we revisit for the paperback if you do have more time with them? So that's something to consider as well.
And how important is exclusivity with guests, with stories, with case studies to the programme? Maybe I can come to you first, Lisa, with that one.
With showbiz guests, I think we're a little bit different to news. I think that we will follow. Or I think when we started in September 2020, we understood we had to follow because we were new. I think now, as Emma mentioned, I think the show has really turned a corner since Christmas and our audiences have been going up and up. And so therefore with that, we've kind of started to feel, well, actually, we should have a degree of that. So if we can get someone exclusive, brilliant, that's great. We are happy to follow possibly one or two shows. It just depends on who that is and how much of a gap there is between us. So, and also if there's a different selling point with someone. So if it's someone who's perhaps got a cookery book out and an ITV show maybe has them as a sit-down interview, we could maybe follow a week later and have them cooking in the kitchen for us. So it's giving us a different way. Or we could possibly follow, we're doing something with the All Creatures Great and Small cast, and they did something for the start of the run, and it was each of the individual cast were placed on different shows, but we're having a couple of them paired together. So again, being paired with a co-star makes it a little bit different. So there isn't, unfortunately, a hard or fast rule about who we will or won't follow. And I wish it was the case. It depends on who the name is, but no more than 2 shows I would say we'd follow now. I think anything more than that, and our editor just feels the story's been told somewhere else, we can't do it any different. So unless they had something else to promote that, we could find a way to work around it. So yeah, I would generally say no more than 2 shows, usually at least, a week apart from the last one, so that we don't feel we're kind of doing something. We don't want to do something the same day as GMB or even the day after. It would have to have a bit of a gap between us. And again, if it's the difference between GMB have them down the line and we have them in studio, again, that's a stronger selling point. So we're more likely to follow if we're following with someone in studio than we are following with someone down the line.
And what about you guys, Emma, Fiona, in terms of exclusivity, whether that's the case study story you're working on or a guest you're being pitched or a filming opportunity? How important is that from a news point of view?
Very, very important. I would say there's not much wriggle room on it. Would you feel?
Yeah, we kind of demand exclusivity. We very rarely follow. The only time I can remember of following was Jackie Weaver, was it?
Yeah,
remember the Skype who don't have the authority.
Yeah.
So we did grab her, but that's the only
and she'd appeared on a couple of shows by then, but
yeah.
In general, no, we wouldn't. That case study would have to be exclusive to us. I mean, obviously they can have been in print, but in terms of TV shows, no, they would have to be exclusive.
Yeah, we don't mind a bit of radio either, do we? Sometimes, but
no,
certainly, yeah.
Or maybe some local news, but apart from that, no, not really.
Apart from that, needs to be exclusive. I'm almost going to come to our audience questions, but I've just got a few more just to put to you before we go to the other questions. Around, we talked about it at the beginning, about you guys obviously as a commercial broadcaster and the Ofcom rules that you have to sort of abide by. I know it's something we were talking about earlier, Lisa, but in terms of expectations, people's expectations for branding that can be included in a segment and what you're sort of restricted by, I think it'd be useful to know from an expectations point of view what brands can expect if their guest or if their story or campaign does appear on the programme.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to bear in mind is if talent are associated with it and they're being paid to kind of do that front a campaign, then we need to let our lawyers kind of know about it. I mean, I think the more synergy there is kind of between someone being relevant to that topic. So if it's kind of Katie Price doing something kind of related to her son Harvey, and obviously that's something that she's talked about a lot, and kind of then that's one thing that would be considered on that basis. But it was Katie Price fronting a PR campaign for her new perfume brand, that feels a lot more commercial for us, and it's unlikely our lawyers would kind of sign off on that. So I mean, as I say, the Jack Whitehall was a really good example we managed to do. We had one recently with Greg Wallace, and he was doing a campaign for Deliveroo about Just Eat, about takeaways being healthy, but we had to be careful again that it's not too much of a plug just for Just Eat and kind of and their brand. But again, because there was MasterChef to talk about, again because it's been quite public, he's lost a lot of weight, and we could kind of talk to him about that and his own diet. There's a way that we can kind of do it, but anything, what happens when someone comes to us with talent associated with the brand, the more information you can give us about their personal connections, any kind of personal stories related to that, I think is more likely to get past our lawyers. I think they get suspicious if they just feel there's no connection at all. This person's purely being paid money just to front a campaign. I mean, I have to admit that rarely happens. Most people, there has been some lived experience and there's a general connection to it. But anything like that, all that has to go across to our legal team and they say yes or no. So it's just worth bearing in mind, as ITV will have a similar thing as a commercial broadcaster, we cannot be seen to be promoting brands overtly during our airtime, or we'll be fined. So we just have to be very careful about it. So there are ways around it for the right person. But again, as I say, the more information you can give us about other projects that they can talk about or personal connections, the more likely it's to get signed off.
Fab. And then the final one I wanted to put to you, Emma and Fiona, was around how, I suppose it's one, it could even be one we'll come back to you as well, Lisa, is how's best to be pitched to if somebody has a good case study story, and what's your advice really to those stories that because I imagine you get a lot of inbound press releases. What are the ones you're looking for? What are you kind of looking for in a pitch, and how's best to go about that? So I don't know if you want to answer that one first, Emma.
I think via email. I don't think anyone takes phone calls anymore, which sounds awful, but just don't have the time. I think the biggest problem, I feel probably say the same, is they're too long. I don't get the top line. I just want what we call the top line. So what's the top line? Can you say it in one or two sentences? Yeah. Otherwise, I probably, if it's very, very long and I start reading and I cannot see what it is that they're trying to say, then it's unlikely I'll keep reading if it hasn't grabbed me straight away. I don't know what you think, Fiv.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that goes for getting it on TV anyway. If the editor can't tell the story, or Steph can't tell the story in one sentence, it's unlikely. If it's a long, involved explanation, it's probably not right for us. It's probably documentary.
Yeah. Would you say the same, Lisa?
Yeah, I think the only thing, and we mentioned this earlier when we were chatting, is just be really honest about where you've placed them. We don't. It's more detrimental to our relationship with you and our relationship with our editor if we come to him and say, yeah, you can have them and that's great, and then when we then go back to you and confirm them, you then say, oh, by the way, did we mention that they're on Good Morning Britain or they're doing that? It's so much better if you can just be upfront with us, because then it means we can be upfront with our editor and say, look, this is the score, this is what they're doing, you'd have to decide this, or do you want to follow that? So I know it's difficult because you're juggling and trying to please everybody, but it will come out in the wash. We will find out that they're on another show, and what will happen is we'll have to cancel that last minute, which leaves you in the lurch and leaves us in the lurch. So it's just not worth it. So just try and be straightforward, honest with us and say, we're pitching out to others, it's a first come, first serve, or we have had some interest from these people. And then it just means, it works out better for all of us, really.
Definitely.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And we understand, we get it. We get that there are other TV places, and we'll work with you, but
we won't get upset, we promise.
Yeah, we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
What we are upset about is being left with a last minute gap because the PR hasn't been honest and suddenly tells us 1 or 2 days before, actually, sorry, they're doing GMB first, is that all right? And they plainly know it's probably not going to be all right.
Be all right.
Yeah.
And I know we briefly spoke about it earlier, Emma, just, you know, it's a simple one, but the importance of getting to know the show and the kind of news that the show tells and how it tells it, and actually to make sure that, you know, when you're pitching, you know, you're pitching the relevant stories as well. I know you mentioned that earlier.
Definitely. Yeah. You know that we don't do certain slots, so there's no point sending me
don't do fashion.
About it. Fashion, don't do beauty, you know. We just don't do that. So
fantastic. Well, I'm just gonna, we've had some questions, and thank you to everyone who sent in their questions.
Sorry, can I just say just something that occurred to me while we were talking about 2 minutes ago? If you watch the programme, at the beginning, there's a lot of discussion around what we call topicals, like a news discussion. Just want to say that Emma and I and our team don't really, I know it sounds weird, but we don't really have the last say in that. We don't deal with that. That is something that the day team do, and they will get their topical discussion. So if you're wondering why that you can't send some information about stats or something and get it included in the topicals, am I making sense, Emma? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
That they will tend to read the top lines in the newspapers to get their news agenda. They won't get it from emails and PRs unless it's been in the press first. Because we don't have time to research and back it up. So Emma and I are chiefly dealing with guests on the sofa. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And to back up Fiona's point, it's similar to us. Like if we're struggling to sell something in, our editor, you know, is an avid, you know, newspaper reader. So if you were to say, you know, FYI, there's going to be a big spread in the paper at the weekend, or they're going to be front cover of Good Housekeeping or anything like that, that does really help us sell it in, because especially with newer talent or lesser known, he'll want to know what's the press pickup, where's the interest there, because we want to feel like we can draw an audience that's kind of interested into it. So if there is things as well that you know that coverage is coming, or you know that you've secured that, that's always really helpful for us to know, because it just, again, helps us pitch it in.
I'm just going to quickly rattle through these questions.
Sure.
I'm going to direct this one to either Emma or Fiona, whichever you's happy to pick it up. Do you have any plans to cover stories around COP26 and climate change?
No, not really.
Again, it will be led by an amazing case study who has done something extraordinary. If we do.
If we did, yeah.
Do certain stories work better on certain days? For example, do you tend to cover sort of lighter stories on a Friday? Yes. Anything like that?
Only Friday. We might do a sort of what we might call a fun Friday story. So lighter, fun stories are more likely to make it on a Friday. But the other days of the week, no, there's no particular day for a particular thing.
I'm just coming to the chat actually to see if we've had anything else in here. So we've talked about obviously human interest stories, but what about animal interest stories, zoos, vets, etc.?
We do a lot of animals on the show.
They are human interest stories to us.
Interest. Yeah, definitely. We love doggy stories.
We love camels.
Yeah, we've done a lot of like dog experts, like during lockdown, like how to, you know, groom your dog, look after your dog, you know, there's all that kind of stuff. So
pet sidekick who can talk to your dog.
Yeah, we've had Amanda Owen with sheep in studio. Like, I mean, the thing is, if we can get them in studio, the more likely they are to.
Definitely.
How do you generally, it's another question we've had, how do you generally like to cover food and drink brands? For example, talking about consumer trends and flag what's new and exciting in the industry. Is that something the programme would cover?
Not really, would we? And we don't really have alcohol on the show as a rule, do we?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, again, it's back to the human interest. So last week we had a story of a baker who couldn't get the right kind of sprinkles because the brand that he used were banned in this country and they weren't brightly coloured enough. So that is an opportunity to get some amazing branded, but there has to be the human interest element behind it. The baker whereas, you know, funny.
The only other thing I think is that sometimes we have Mr. Carrington kind of do his bargains. So occasionally, like if it's Mother's Day or if it's kind of Valentine's Day or something, he might kind of do his top 10 things of gifts but again, really think budget focused, you know, that's a real big point of us. It's all about bargains. It's all about, even you see that in our cookery when we're doing it, it's like we've done a week where it was like how to feed your family for like under 20 quid for the week. You know, so it's all kind of about budget. So it's not really those kind of high-end brands, luxury or anything like that. It's much more about affordability, and we're quite big on things like crafting. You know, how can you make your own picnic basket? How can you make your own kind of, so stuff like that does well for us as well.
Another question here: would you feature a performance from a national tour?
Ooh.
Possibly. I think it depends. We haven't done an awful lot of performances, but that was only because of the social distancing kind of guidelines, because we couldn't have people in studio with kind of distance and stuff. And we've got a nice little area kind of, I think we had our windows sadly in the summertime, where we've got a nice little area outside kind of on the dock, which we haven't used an awful lot yet. If we've done performances so far, they've been little kind of acoustic things on the sofa. So we've maybe had, and we have got a couple of things like that coming up. The simpler and stripped back it can kind of be, the better. But yeah, it's something I'm keen to explore, but it's not something we've managed to pull off just yet. But again, most of that's because of COVID, not because there's not been a wish for.
I'm just going to do the last couple of questions now. So last week you did a great segment on Freddie Forster's involvement in a research study for SU2C. Would you cover charity research stories outside of Channel 4's partnership?
Oh yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, outside of Channel. Outside
of Stand Up to Cancer.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I suppose to follow up that, are awareness days, again, if there's a good case study story, but are awareness days something that the programme will cover, or?
We do, the editor doesn't like it, but we do.
But we do cover it, but only if it's a great story. Yeah, so it's possible, but as a rule, a lot of TV shows slightly bulk at awareness days, but then they all end up doing something usually. So I would say, just keep plugging away if you're trying to promote something in that way.
I'm going to do this as the final question now. So for the VT packages you referenced earlier, would these always be UK centric, or are you interested in content from other countries as long as the story is relevant to your audience?
I think I think we would be, wouldn't we? But I think it's just, again, a COVID thing that's just stopped travel. So
and budgets, I guess.
And budgets. So we haven't done much stuff abroad yet, but I don't see, hopefully that can kind of change. But again, it will depend on the strength of stories. I mean, it just depends on that. I mean, I think to begin with, they were quite keen on doing stuff locally, kind of to show off Yorkshire and kind of the surrounding kind of areas. But hopefully that might push out a bit more in the future.
And we definitely do international stories, but they've all been down the line. But just to say that the case studies don't have to be British.
Well, they must be able to
speak English. Yeah, as long as they can speak English.
I think the other one worth noticing is it's very, very rare we do pre-records, just as an FYI. Most of the time our editor will absolutely want somebody live. So if that is an international story, you have to take account of the time difference in that, and it might mean 3 o'clock in the morning, but he very rarely will want something pre-recorded, just purely because we have our audience in to react and we have our presenter family. And so it's not something we've done. I don't know if the news team have done one, but I don't think it's something we've done yet.
Only to support somebody on the sofa to tell a backstory, I think.
Thank you so much, all of you. It's been great to have you with us this afternoon. A really good chat, and I think we managed to get through quite a lot there, which was pretty impressive. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everybody else who's joined this afternoon as well.